Hello everybody, in this video I want to do something a little bit different and speculate as to the future Tesla factory locations. And in the first part of this video I'm going to focus on three locations that I think are highly likely for Tesla factories within the next 5 years, and then I'm going to talk about 5 more locations that are a little bit more speculative that eventually will happen, but probably looking at 5+ years out for Tesla factory locations. And this is just something pretty exciting for me to talk about because it's really exciting when a new Tesla factory location gets announced, and I'm extremely bullish, and I think there's going to be factories popping up all over the place during our lifetime. Before I talk about the likely location of future factories, I just wanted to talk about the current factories or current factories that are already confirmed. First, there was the Fremont factory, where most Teslas have been made for the last decade, and then the Shanghai factory was announced, which is currently producing cars, and then Tesla Berlin, and then most recently announced is Tesla Austin down in Texas. The first of the 3 locations that I think is very likely to be announced in the next 5 years is in Brazil, and although I'm just going to leave it broadly at Brazil, I think São Paulo is a very likely location. It's actually the largest market for Uber as of 2018. It's actually not Los Angeles or New York City like one might expect. It's actually down in São Paulo, which could be a potential huge location for Tesla robo-taxis if that ever rolls out. But even if not, there's a huge potential for a huge client base down in Brazil, and they'll also be able to serve to other countries down in Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, and Peru, because right now it's really expensive to transport vehicles down to South America. Although in some of the countries such as Colombia and Venezuela, I don't think Tesla would do nearly as well because oil is dirt cheap there. Another location that I think is extremely likely to be announced within the next 5 years is Tesla India, and I think the most 2 likely locations are Mumbai or Delhi. And as you can see here, it's a huge population center. The map is a little bit outdated in 2011, but you still get the idea. Mumbai is not quite as centrally located, but there are huge cities and huge clientele within a small radius, and then Delhi is a little bit more centrally located and maybe a slightly better location, but there's a massive growing economy here, and I think Tesla would do extremely well, especially once they release that $25,000 car in a few years. And I think it's also very likely they will come out with some kind of scooter or really small vehicle that will operate really well in the Brazil or India streets that will sell really well in those markets, and maybe it will only sell in those local markets. The next location that I think is extremely likely to be announced in the next 5 years is Tesla New York State. There's actually already a Tesla solar factory in northern New York. So there's currently a Tesla factory in the western United States, as I mentioned, and then there's going to be one in Texas. So the central, southern, and western United States are going to be served, but it's still going to be relatively expensive to get cars to the northeast, and I think New York State would be able to better serve that market and get the cars where they're manufactured a lot closer to their clients or their customers. And now I'm actually going to talk about 5 locations that are not quite as likely to be announced in the next 5 years, but I think are extremely likely candidates for probably the next 10 years, or maybe even a little bit further out, just because they do have huge potential markets. And the first one, really close by to New York State, is Ontario. And Canada is extremely progressive. They don't have a huge population or nearly as big of GDP as the United States, but they have a huge GDP per capita, and as I already stated, they're pretty progressive, and Ontario has a lot of really big cities, so I think in the southern area there near Michigan is a very likely location for a Tesla factory. And another somewhat likely location to happen eventually is a Tesla London. So right now, factories that will be built in the future in Berlin will still have to cross the English Channel, which is not a fun time for Tesla, I'm sure. So Tesla London would help bridge that gap. And again, very progressive and a huge market here in the United Kingdom. Another really likely location for a Tesla factory would be here in Australia and probably in Sydney. Tesla Solar already has somewhat of a presence in Australia, and a factory here would help serve the greater Oceania market. And then possibly the least likely on this total list of the 8 perspective locations is a Tesla Tokyo location, and although it's still very likely to happen eventually, I'd say not as much on this list just because they're already really great at manufacturing cars really cheaply in Japan, so they'll probably want to keep it in-house, with whichever electronic vehicle they do create. But if Tesla were to get involved in Japan, I'm sure it would do well eventually. And then last but not least is a Tesla Johannesburg, where Elon actually grew up. Elon has said that he does want to have a location on each continent, and right now Northern Africa will be able to be served by the Berlin location, but Central and Southern Africa, really, it won't be cheap to get vehicles there, and there is a pretty big prospective market in South Africa. And then a couple of honorable mentions would be in South Korea and France. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Please leave me a question or comment down below, and I'd love to chat with you about this video. I really enjoyed making it, even though it was a little bit out there. I do a ton of brief stock analysis videos on my channel, so be sure to come and check that out and subscribe for more content. Thank you so much for watching to the end.